Ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome back to the Weigh In Podcast. We continue our Meet the Fighters series with the second to last division that is the light heavyweights. 205 pounds is very interesting right now and arguably boasts the biggest star in the sport at the head of this division. So, without further ado, let's kick things off with the 15th ranked contender. Going to see a lot of power punchers in this division, and it kicks things off with one of the biggest, that is Atomic Alonzo Menifield. Menifield is 17-6 in his MMA career with notable wins over Dustin Jacoby, Jimmy Crute, Misha Serkinov, and Paul Craig. Did begin his MMA career in very impressive 9-0 before finally running into Devin Clark inside the UFC. Um, Obviously, very heavy hands. He has won 53% of his wins by way of KO TKO. That is 9 of his 17. And obviously, with the nickname being Atomic, you know he's got some very serious knockout power. 2 UFC performance bonuses throughout his career as well, so definitely not a boring fighter to watch. He knocked out Paul Craig in the first round, which earned him a bonus, and also a split decision win over Julius Walker, a very competitive fight of the night. Does have a bit of an underrated submission game as well. He does have 4 wins by submission and has never lost by way of submission. So I do feel like obviously his power is the main thing and he does prefer to keep the fight standing, but when he goes to the ground, he's definitely not a slouch there and can at least hold his own. So Menifield, he's definitely older. He's up there. He's 38, so I don't necessarily think he's going to see the title picture, but I do think he's fairly underrated for what he's done and who he's gone up against. He's lost to some of the best in this division, so Menifield, one of the more underrated guys and always fun to watch, always going for the knockout in his fights. Coming in at number 14, we have another up-and-comer in this division, one of the younger contenders at just 27, and it is China's Zhang Mingyang. Zhang is 19-7 in his MMA career, already a lot of experience despite such a young age, with notable wins over Anthony Smith, Ozzy Diaz, and Brenderson Ribeiro. 3 UFC performance bonuses as well in just 4 Octagon appearances, all of them wins. The only one he didn't score a performance bonus for was his loss to Johnny Walker in his last fight. Very high level finishing ability with his strikes. He does have 68% of his wins. That is 13 of his 19 wins by way of KO TKO. Also has 6 wins by submission, has never won a fight by decision, and only one fight in his entire career went to decision, which he did lose. But all 3 of his UFC wins came by first round knockout. The latest one being Anthony Smith, knocked out just a little over 4 minutes into the first round. So Zhang Mingyang, very heavy hands and a lot of power in those shots. A guy that the UFC wants to push. Unfortunately, just came up a little bit short against Johnny Walker, but definitely still has a lot of potential. I'm very interested to see what's going to be next for him. And who knows? The sky's the limit for Zhang Mingyang. Coming in at number 13 is a longtime veteran of this division, 2 separate stints inside the UFC, and that is the Ukrainian Nikita Krylov. Krylov is 30-11 in his MMA career, a long career, with very good notable wins over Ryan Spann, Volkan Oezdemir, Alexander Gustafsson, Johnny Walker, Ovent St. Preux, and Fabio Maldonado. In between UFC stints, he did capture the Fight Nights Global Light Heavyweight Championship. Never got to defend that title. He was re-signed by the UFC after gaining that title. In his first UFC stint, he did compile a 5-fight win streak before losing to Misha Serkinov. And after that loss, he was surprisingly let go by the UFC. I don't exactly remember if he was just not re-signed or if they actually like straight up cut him. But either way, did leave the UFC for Fight Nights Global, competed 3 times there and 1 time in another Ukrainian promotion as well. Pretty good grappling. He definitely prefers to take the fight to the ground, but he does have competent striking as well. Majority of his wins, 16 of them to be exact, come by way of submission, so definitely a lot better on the ground than he is on the feet. And he's got an interesting fight coming up. He's lost 2 in a row and is scheduled to fight the up-and-coming Modestas Bukauskas, who's also on his second UFC stint this weekend at UFC 324. Very interesting fight as Krylov looks to keep his spot in the rankings, and as a guy that's been towards the top of this division for the better part of the last decade, definitely would be a little bittersweet to see him lose and fall outside that top 15. Relatively speaking, he's still young, only 33, but has had some rough losses lately and definitely needs to get this win over Bukauskas if he wants to keep his spot in the top 15. Coming in at number 12, a guy that is one of the most difficult to really get a true grasp on. He's pretty streaky and inconsistent throughout his UFC career, but coming off a very big win over Zhang Mingyang, and that is Johnny Walker. Walker's 22-9 in his MMA career, notable wins over Zhang Mingyang, Anthony Smith, Paul Craig, Iwan Kutalaba, Ryan Spann, and Khalil Roundtree Jr. One of the most vicious elbow knockouts you will see. That knockout over Roundtree. That was Johnny Walker's UFC debut, as a matter of fact. And that win has aged very gracefully. Before coming to the UFC, he held the light heavyweight title at European Beatdown and UC MMA as well. Don't think he defended either of those titles, if I remember right, but still at least captured the titles. Very wild striking and very unorthodox. You see him do all kinds of crazy stuff inside the cage, especially earlier in his UFC career. He was doing just about everything you can imagine, and it was working originally. He did win his first 3 UFC fights in a combined 2 minutes and 48 seconds over Khalil Roundtree, Justin Ledet, and Misha Serkinov before running into Corey Anderson and Nikita Krylov. He's kind of been up and down with mixed results since. But like I said, is coming off that very impressive performance of the night, winning performance over Zhang Mingyang. 5 UFC performances to boot in his UFC career. So when he is on, he definitely delivers the highlights, and his highlight reel is one that's a lot of fun to watch. And a big fight for him coming up. He's scheduled to fight Dominic Reyes on April 11th. That's going to be a very fun fight. Two guys that are very tall and long, even for the light heavyweight division. I think that's going to be a very fun stylistic matchup. And with Reyes being in the spot that he's in and Walker getting that big win over Zhang Mingyang, maybe Johnny's starting to surge a little bit. He's still only 33, so like I said, for these upper weight classes, guys in their mid 30s are still considered fairly young. So 33 is still pretty young for the light heavyweight division. Johnny Walker still got at least a good 5 years left in him, if not more. So definitely still has a chance. He's got the skills to make a good run. It's just a matter of putting things together. He's a little bit chinny as well, tends to get caught and knocked out in some of the weirdest ways possible. And just considering his weird style, it's just funny seeing him. It's not funny seeing him get knocked out, but it's just weird how he always gets knocked out in some of the most strange ways. Just looks so awkward, but either way, that fight against Dominic Reyes is going to be very big for the division and could infuse a new contender if Johnny Walker could pull that win off. Coming in at number 11, a guy that had a ton of hype but has really fallen off as of late, just can't seem to compete with that top level, and that is the Rocket, Alexander Rakic of Austria. Rakic is 14-6 in his MMA career with notable wins over Thiago Santos, Anthony Smith, and Jimmy Manoa. That Manoa KO was disgusting. And he's shown very good knockout power throughout his career. 9 of his 14 wins are by way of KO TKO. And like I said, that Jimmy Manoa knockout, you're going to want to go watch it. One number performance bonus. Pretty long reach with very powerful kicks as well. Those kicks have been on display throughout his career. And as I said, he was a guy that was previously viewed as a very hot up and comer. He was 6-1 to begin his UFC career, and the only loss was a very close split decision against Volkan Oezdemir, who at the time was at the top of this division. Unfortunately for him, though, he has lost 4 in a row since then. All very good fighters: Jan Blachowicz, Yuri Prochazka, Magomed Ankalaev, and Azamat Mirzakhanov. But that last loss in particular against Mirzakhanov was dropped and finished from a power jab from Mirzakhanov, so definitely not a very graceful loss. 4 in a row, though, even to elite competition, 4 in a row is still a tough pill to swallow. And whenever Rakic's next fight is booked, it definitely will feel like a crossroads fight for him as to whether he can get back into the title picture or whether he's going to fade and never be able to return to the title picture. So Rakic at a bit of a crossroads. Can't wait to see what's next for him. But now we crack the top 10, and we've got another hot up-and-comer with a lot of heavy KO power, and that is Bogdan Guskov. Guskov is 18-3-1 in his MMA career, notable wins over Nikita Krylov, Billy Elikana, and Ryan Spann. Elite finishing ability. He's got a 100% finish rate. And just for the newbies out there, when we say 100% finish rate, that only includes wins. That does not include losses. He does have one loss by decision. Every single other one of his fights did go the distance. The only one to go to a decision was his last fight, a draw against Jan Blachowicz, but every single one of his previous 21 fights ended before the final horn. He does have 2 UFC performance bonuses as well in such a short career, just 6 fights. The 2 bonuses came against Zach Palga and Ryan Spann. Spann arguably being the biggest win of his career. Yeah, you could argue Nikita Krylov probably, but Spann was definitely a statement. And he is on a 5-fight unbeaten streak. As I mentioned, he is coming off that draw to Jan Blachowicz. So it's not a 5-fight win streak, but technically he did not lose that fight. So in his last 5 fights, he's still unbeaten. And going the distance to a draw with Jan Blachowicz is definitely not anything to be ashamed of. Jan has been at the top of this division for a long time. And I think that was a great test to see where Guskov is in his current development. Again, still very young for the light heavyweight division. He is just 33 as well, so plenty of time to get to the top and still shows immense potential at light heavyweight. Coming in at number 9, we have a former 2-time title challenger and a guy that a lot of people thought did enough to dethrone the greatest of all time, Jon Jones. Ultimately was not given the nod. Kind of went on a bit of a slide, then a streak, but unfortunately did lose his last fight. We're talking about the devastator, Dominic Reyes. Reyes is 15-5 in his MMA career, notable wins, and it's a pretty long list over Nikita Krylov, Anthony Smith, Dustin Jacoby, Chris Weidman, Volkan Oezdemir, Ovince St. Preux, and Jared Cannonier. He was the former University of MMA amateur champion, and no, that is not an actual school. That is just the name of the promotion. Sounds hilarious to think it could be a University of MMA, but just the name of the promotion. Don't think too much about it. As I mentioned, did challenge for the UFC light heavyweight title twice. His challenge against Jon Jones, many people thought that he won, and it was insanely close. So there were so many people that thought he did enough to beat Jon Jones that night, and that is still one of the most heavily disputed decisions to this day. After that, Jon Jones would vacate, and Jan Blachowicz and Reyes would compete for the vacant title. Unfortunately, Reyes would lose that fight and also his next 2 after that. Went on a 4-fight losing streak after getting his first title shot. He was undefeated before that title shot as well at 12-0. Lost his next 4. Would come back and win 3 in a row, capped off by a left-hand knockout in the first round over Nikita Krylov back in April of 2025. Unfortunately, though, in his last fight, got matched up against Carlos Ulberg and was finished in the first round. So Reyes, there's been questions about his chin. It looked like it was starting to hold up for a little bit, but Ulberg absolutely put his lights out. So it'll be very interesting to see where he's at in his next fight against Johnny Walker, because Walker is known for his knockouts. Now, Walker definitely one of the more inconsistent guys in the division, but this is a big fight for Dominic Reyes to show that that comeback streak wasn't a fluke, and he did just lose to one of the best in Ulberg. And Ulberg is one of the best contenders in this division. We will obviously get to him a little bit later, but definitely not a loss to be ashamed of. But just with the way Reyes' career has played out thus far, that fight against Johnny Walker is going to be very indicative as to where the rest of his career will take place, whether it's in the title picture or kind of at the bottom of the top 15 and a fringe contender. Now we move on to the number 8 contender, and this is a guy, again, that's been at the top of this division for the better part of the last decade, and that is Volkan Oezdemir. Oezdemir's 21-8 in his MMA career with notable wins over Alonzo Menifield, Johnny Walker, Bogdan Guskov, Paul Craig, Alexander Rakic, Jimmy Manoa, and Ovince St. Preux. Did manage to make it to a title shot inside the UFC against Daniel Cormier. That matchup with Cormier came back in 2018. Volkan unfortunately did lose that fight, but still very high level knockout power. That's where his name No Time comes from. He got his title shot off of back-to-back wins in less than a minute, both knockouts over Misha Serkinov and Jimmy Manoa. The Manoa performance did give him a performance bonus, his first of 3 inside the UFC. And he saw a little bit of a career resurgence in his last 4 fights as well. 3-1 in those 4, with his only loss coming against Carlos Ulberg, another mention of the Black Jag. But all 3 of those wins in his last 4 did come inside the first round over Bogdan Gus, or they weren't all knockouts. I'm not sure if I just said that or not, but all of them finishes inside the first round. A submission over Bogdan Guskov, and then knockouts of Johnny Walker and Alonzo Menifield. So Oezdemir's been on a bit of a hot streak lately as well. Going to be interesting to see what's next for him. He's, as I mentioned, had a little bit of a resurgence. He is starting to get up there at 36, but again, as I mentioned, these upper weight classes, that doesn't really mean a whole lot until you really hit 40, or maybe even like 38, 39. So Volkan still has time. no pun intended with the nickname, but still has time to reestablish himself as a top guy in this division. So we'll see who they decide to give him for his first fight of 2026. Could be a big one. Now, coming in at number 7, we've got quite a few former champions hanging around the top of this division, and we get to the first one at number 7, and that is Sweet Dreams Jamal Hill. Hill's 12-4 in his MMA career with notable wins over Glover Teixeira, Thiago Santos, Johnny Walker, Jimmy Crute, and Ovince St. Preux. Did win the title in a vacant bout against Glover Teixeira. That was after Yuri Prohashka had to vacate due to an injury. It was actually Jan Blachowicz and Magomed Ankalaev that fought for the title originally, went to a draw, and then they made Jamal Hill versus Glover Teixeira. Jamal would end up winning and unfortunately have to vacate his title as well due to a torn Achilles. He would make it back to a title fight against Alex Pereira at UFC 300 in the headliner. Did fail to regain his title and unfortunately has been on a 3-fight slide since, losing to the best of the best in this division, but still on that 3-fight losing streak. Despite that, he does have a good reputation inside the UFC, does have 4 performance bonuses in the UFC. That is in 11 fights. And he did begin his UFC career 6-1 as well, so was very strong to begin his career, known for his heavy hands. 4 fights in a row, including his title win, did win performance bonuses. So Jamal, very exciting when he's on, but as of late, just hasn't really seemed to. He just looks off a little bit. Ever since he's come back from that torn Achilles, he just hasn't quite looked right. So maybe it's the injury lingering. I know an Achilles injury, especially, is very difficult to come back from, especially in other sports. You see it in sports like baseball, football. When guys tear their Achilles, it's not a career ender necessarily, but they aren't necessarily the same. They don't have the explosion that they used to. Haven't really seen an injury much like that in MMA, so at least I haven't personally, so this is a little bit newer for me, but it's starting to me, just based off what I know about other sports, to look like it may be the same in MMA. When you tear your Achilles, you're just not quite the same afterwards. So hopefully Jamal can prove us wrong. He's still only 34, so very young in this division and a long way to go, but we'll see what's next for him. He's going to need a big win, though, in his next fight to turn things around. Coming in at number 6, one of the older contenders in this division at 36, but he is still technically an up-and-comer, and he is running rampant through this division, just slicing through the light heavyweight rankings, and that is the undefeated Azamat Murzakanov of Russia. Murzakanov is 16-0 in his MMA career, notable wins over Alexander Rakic, Brendan Ribeiro, Alonzo Menefield, Dustin Jacoby, Devin Clark, and Andre Muniz. He is the former Brave CF openweight champion. Kind of interesting that they had an openweight title, but Murzakanov did manage to win it. Very prolific finisher. In his 6 UFC fights, he has finished 5 of them. The only one to make it the distance with him was Dustin Jacoby back in 2023, but Jacoby, an elite kickboxer in and of itself, so not surprising that he was able to make it the distance. And a very interesting fight upcoming for Murzakanov, as Paulo Costa is coming up from middleweight, and they are feeding him to the 6th-ranked contender in this division on April 11th. It's kind of weird matchmaking, if you ask me. I mean, I know Costa's coming up, but I just think it's a little strange to be giving a guy like Murzakanov Paulo Costa, and something I'll probably get into when I start doing more of the actual podcast content, with my face and everything, is just the matchmaking lately just hasn't quite made a lot of sense. I mean, you got the 13th ranked middleweight coming up, and Murzakanov is just on a tear. You would think you'd want to give him a top 5 guy, and I understand Costa's a big name coming up from middleweight, but this doesn't really make a lot of sense. It's more just like you're trying to throw Costa into the top 5 of light heavyweight instead of building Murzakanov, as well as giving Costa someone maybe around the 10 to 12 mark, maybe like a Nikita Krylov or Dominic Reyes, even someone kind of in that ballpark. I know Reyes has a fight on the books already, but just someone in that vicinity. Guskov even. I mean, you're basically cannibalizing one or the other in this sense. So interesting matchmaking for me. I'm not quite understanding that, but nevertheless, that is the next fight for Murzakanov. So we'll see if he can improve to 17-0 against Paulo Costa. Now we crack the top 5 and another one of the many former champions at the top of this division and one of the most beloved, and that is Poland's Jan Blachowicz. Bohovic is 29-11-2 in his MMA career. That's a mouthful, with notable wins over Alexander Rakic, Israel Adesanya, Dominic Reyes, Corey Anderson, Jacare Souza, Luke Rockhold, Nikita Krylov, Jimmy Manoa, and Jared Cannonier. He did hold light heavyweight gold and defended that belt once in that super fight against Israel Adesanya. Also held the KSW light heavyweight title outside the UFC, defended that twice. He did challenge against Magomed Ankalaev to regain that light heavyweight title. As I mentioned earlier, that was after the title was vacated by Yuri Prochazka. That fight ended in a draw, so neither Blachowicz or Ankalaev walked out the champ that night. Very interesting story for Jan Blachowicz as well. He began his UFC career 2-4, was down and out, and honestly probably would have been cut had he lost his next fight. But he was walking through a forest in Poland. He loves nature walks, and he found a rope from which someone had unfortunately hanged themselves. It was tied into a noose. And I'm not sure if this is a Polish thing or if this is just in general and I'm unaware, but apparently the rope from a noose is from where someone committed suicide. Apparently that's good luck if you touch it. You can get good luck from it. Maybe that's a Polish thing. I'm not really sure. I'd never heard of that, but either way, Blachowicz did that, touched the rope. Maybe he even took a piece of it. I don't really remember exactly, but after that went on a 9-1 run, including his light heavyweight title win. So maybe there was something to that. The legendary Polish power was born. He just started knocking out everybody. Or Luke Rockhold got the worst of it, but um, just such an impressive run for Jan Blachowicz. Won 6 performance bonuses during that run as well. Was just KOing everybody. Corey Anderson, Dominic Reyes got a bad one too. So went on a crazy run. Has kind of been up and down a little bit lately, and now is 41 years old. So it's kind of hard to 42 actually. He just turned 42 and about to turn 43. So I don't think Blachowicz is going to see a title fight again, unfortunately, just due to his age. But he is still kicking around the light heavyweight division, which at that age is just insane. So shout out to Jan Blachowicz. Coming into number 4, not a former champion, but did challenge for a UFC title recently, and that is Khalil Roundtree Jr. Roundtree's 24-7 in his MMA career, notable wins over Jamal Hill, Anthony Smith, Dustin Jacoby, Modestas Bukauskas, Eric Anders, Gokhan Saki, and Paul Craig. He was an amateur champion inside Tough Enough and did challenge for the light heavyweight title against Alex Pereira. Did come up short, but gave Poatan arguably his toughest title fight other than the one he lost. Has won 6 performance bonuses inside the UFC as well and 18 showings, so definitely a very exciting fighter when he lets things go. Sometimes can be a little too tentative for some people's liking, but when he lets things go, he is incredibly powerful and extremely dangerous. He possesses elite Muay Thai striking as well. I remember the fight when he kind of really debuted that style against Eric Anders, and it was like full Muay Thai stance, like very light on the front leg, doing the Muay Thai. I'm not really sure the technical terms, so I probably sound stupid saying this, but the Muay Thai step where you kind of pick your leg up a little bit like you're feigning the kick. I mean, it was one of the most insane performances I've seen from him, and he's really kind of ran with that style all the way up to the top of this division. So it's been crazy seeing his run. Went on a 5-fight win streak before that loss to Alex Pereira. Did unfortunately lose his last fight against Yuri Prochazka, but again, that fight was actually a really good showing for Roundtree because he was winning that fight before getting finished, and it did win fight of the night as well. So Roundtree still got a bonus despite the loss. Still kicking around the top of this division, and still just 35 years old, so plenty of time for him at the top. Khalil Roundtree is still very dangerous for anybody on any given night. That brings us to the number 3 contender in this division. And a guy that we've mentioned a couple times has beaten some of the contenders ranked below him already. So you've heard his name mentioned before. It is the Black Jag, Carlos Ulberg. Ulberg, a very impressive 13-1 in his MMA career with notable wins over Dominic Reyes, Jan Blachowicz, Volkan Oezdemir, and Alonzo Menifield. That only loss coming against Kennedy and Nzechukwu in a firefight. He was a King in the Ring kickboxing champion and possessed a 19-2 kickboxing record before switching solely to MMA. Has earned 4 UFC performance bonuses as well in 10 fights, so a very exciting kickboxing style. He's a lot of fun to watch and has won 8 of his 13 wins by knockout. He's currently on a 9-fight win streak, so following that loss to Kennedy and Nzechukwu, he just went on a crazy run. Has not lost in almost 5 years. And something just kind of funny that I actually didn't know before I was doing research for this video. He was twice offered to star on New Zealand's version of The Bachelor. That's not relevant to his career at all, but with some of these fighters, if they have something very interesting about them outside of combat sports, I'll slide it in here, like Valentina shooting or whatever it may be. But just something that's hilarious. You just wouldn't really think a cage fighter would be doing stuff like that, but from everything I saw, he turned it down, but just kind of strange. But I'm very glad he chose to focus on MMA instead of doing The Bachelor because this is absolutely where he deserves to be. There's talks of him maybe even getting the next title shot against the champion. We'll see what the champ wants to do, whether he moves up to heavyweight. But if he stays down at light heavyweight, it is probably going to be Olberg getting the next title shot. And with him holding that 9-fight win streak, I'm all for it. I would love to see him against the champ. I think it'd be a fun fight. But coming in at number two, a guy that unfortunately has lost twice to the current champion, but still one of the most dangerous contenders in the entire sport, and that is Yuri Prochazka. Prochazka's 32-5-1 in his MMA career with a very strong notable wins list over Khalil Roundtree, Jamal Hill, Alexander Rakic, Glover Teixeira, Dominic Reyes, Volkan Oezdemir, King Mo, Muhammad Lawal, and Vadim Nemkov back in the day. He is the former UFC light heavyweight champion, won that title against Glover Teixeira, and then did vacate due to a shoulder injury. Has not regained the belt since, but has hung around the top of this division consistently over the last half decade. He was also the Ryzen light heavyweight champion. He did defend that title one time before vacating to come to the UFC, and what a signing that was. He did challenge Alex Pereira twice in an attempt to regain the light heavyweight title, was unable to do it. The first time it was after Jamal Hill vacated. The second time it was just a straight up title challenge against Poatan and did lose that as well. But Poatan's the only guy at the top to beat him. I mean, he's beat Rakic, he beat Hill, he beat Roundtree. Has not fought Ankalaev yet, but I'd love to see that fight. I think that'd be a lot of fun. Um, Also, something crazy about him is 8 UFC performance bonuses in 8 fights. He had some where he double bonus, like fight of the night and performance of the night, like the Khalil Roundtree win and the Dominic Reyes win. So his losses against Pereira, he didn't receive a bonus for, but double bonused in 2 fights. But one of the most exciting fighters in the entire sport. It is so easy to be a fan of him. He's such a cool guy, just embraces that samurai spirit, the life of a fighter. He lives and dies for this sport. 28 of his 32 wins as well also come by way of knockout. And crazy enough, he only has 3 submission wins in his entire career, but one of them was over the greatest grapplers in the history of this division to win the light heavyweight title when he beat Glover Teixeira. Just goes to show how crazy and unpredictable this sport can be. But Yuri Prochazka is absolutely one of the most dangerous contenders in the sport. He's only 33. The only thing kind of hindering him right now is he has lost to the champion Alex Pereira twice. So while Poatan is still champion, it's going to be tough to justify Yuri getting a title shot, and especially getting finished by Pereira both times, and the second time in brutal fashion. It's it's hard to justify it. He really needs Pereira to move up or lose again to get another title shot. So if Ankalaev had remained the champion, I think Yuri would absolutely be getting the next title shot had Ankalaev beat Pereira in the rematch. But with Pereira back as champion, I would personally like to see Prochazka against Ankalaev. I think that'd be a super fun fight for both of them. So maybe we get that fight, maybe we don't. But other than that, Yuri's beat Roundtree, he's beat Hill, he's beat Rock. I mean, if Oberg's going to get the next shot, then that's the fight that makes sense. So I would absolutely give that fight to Yuri. Let's have some fun. But speaking of Ankalaev, he is the current number one contender. The former champ is 21-2-1 in his MMA career with notable wins over Alex Pereira, Alexander Rakic, Johnny Walker, Anthony Smith, Thiago Santos, Volkan Oezdemir, Nikita Krylov, and Iwan Kutelaba kind of twice. He is, of course, the former light heavyweight champion. He took the title from Alex Pereira and did lose it in an immediate rematch, but still did hold UFC gold. He will always be a former UFC champion. Also held the AFC light heavyweight title and multiple amateur championships outside the UFC. Began his MMA career 9-0 before a crazy submission loss in his UFC debut to Paul Craig. Ankalaev was winning that fight, was up at least 2 rounds, maybe was even winning the third. and then literally tapped to a triangle choke with 1 second left in the fight. And up until his loss to Alex Pereira, that was his only loss. Following that loss, he did win, or not win, but he was unbeaten in his next 14. He had a draw with Jan Blachowicz and a no contest against Johnny Walker for an illegal knee, but unbeaten in 14 straight after his first career loss. And something about him that you'll see a lot of people say, he's not a grappler. A lot of people think just because he comes from Dagestan that he's a grappler, but he's not. He's a striker. He has never won a fight by submission in his entire career, and 11 of his 21 wins have come by way of knockout. So Ankalaev is a striker. Anyone that wants to, like, he can wrestle, don't get me wrong. He's dominated fights with his wrestling before. The Jan Blachowicz fight, he dominated the last 3 rounds of the wrestling. Paul Craig, he was dominating with his wrestling until he got caught. He is a good wrestler, but he is primarily a striker. And so many people get that confused. That's why he was able to beat Pineda the first time around. I know the second time it didn't go well, but the first time around he was able to compete on the feet with Pineda because he's a striker. And so many people just misconstrue that because of his origin. Just because you're from Dagestan doesn't always mean that you're primarily a wrestler. He also has 4 performance bonuses in his UFC career, so how boring can you be when you've got 4 of those? But Ankalaev, the former champ, unfortunately, it was a very rough loss in the first minute and a half in his first title defense against Pineda, so he's not going to be getting a trilogy with him anytime soon. Going to need to win a couple fights if he wants to do that, if Pineda even stays at light heavyweight, but still the number 1 contender. I believe still one of the best in the division. I can't wait to see him next. As I mentioned, let's run him and Yuri Prochazka. Let's see what would happen. But that does take us to the current champion in this division, the biggest star in the entire sport at present, the reigning, defending light heavyweight champion, and that is Poatan Alex Pereira. Pereira is just 13-3 in his MMA career with notable wins over Magomed Ankalaev, Khalil Roundtree, Yuri Prochazka twice, Jamal Hill, Jan Blachowicz, Israel Adesanya, and Sean Strickland. And just before we start running down the rest of his resume in detail, after seeing that notable wins list, he's probably accomplished the most in such few career fights that I've ever seen anyone do. I mean, Brock Lesnar accomplished a lot in a few fights, but Pereira in just 16 fights has become one of the greatest to ever compete in the history of this sport. So let's break this down. First of all, outside the UFC, he was the former Glory kickboxing middleweight and light heavyweight champion, defeated Israel Adesanya twice in kickboxing, brutally knocking him out in their second fight. And overall was 33-7 in 40 kickboxing fights, a very impressive record. So he already was incredibly accomplished when he signed with the UFC. Inside the UFC, he held the middleweight title. He took it from Israel Adesanya before losing in a rematch, then bumped up to light heavyweight, took that title too. Earned 3 defenses before losing to Ankalaev, and then got the immediate rematch and just smoked Magomed in their rematch. As I mentioned, it was less than a minute and a half, an overhand right, Ankalaev shot, Pereira got on top, ground and pound. It was over quickly. Ankalaev did have a broken rib going into that fight, but Pereira was also not at 100% going into their first fight. Unfortunately for newer fans of the sport, as frustrating as that can be, it's very rare that a fighter enters a fight 100%, so you're just going to have to get used to some of those injuries affecting fights. It happens. It is what it is, but the record books show what they show. Good. For Pereira, he does have 7 performance bonuses in just 12 UFC fights as well. Always been incredibly exciting. And of course, with his kickboxing prowess, 11 of his 13 wins have come by way of knockout. Every single one of his light heavyweight title defenses, including the light heavyweight title win, was a knockout as well. Khalil Roundtree went the deepest with him, went into the 4th round before Pereira finished him, but every single one of his title wins has been by a finish. It's very, very rare that he goes to a decision. So Pereira, one of the most exciting in the sport. I compare him to Chuck Liddell, not necessarily in style, but just the way that he's reigned over this division, just absolutely vicious and knocking out everybody. He's been the closest thing to Chuck Liddell that we've had since Chuck Liddell, and that's the reason he's such a big star. And his personality is just kind of cool too. He's a cool dude. He, does that little dance that he does. Chama, right? But Pereira, the biggest star in the sport, there's talks of him bumping up to heavyweight. He would be the first person in UFC history to go for a third belt in a third weight class. No one's ever even attempted that before. And that's kind of what people want to see for Poatan, just because he's kind of cleaned out light heavyweight. He did have that loss to Ankalaev, but avenged it. Um, I wouldn't even hate seeing him in Ulberg and then he bumps up, but I know they've talked about doing that at the White House. I don't really like this whole White House concept anyway, and I'll talk about that eventually too. But just I would love to see him at heavyweight, but with Olberg kind of being the last guy at 205, I would like to see that fight because honestly, even if Pineda loses to Carlos Olberg, he's still going to be able to go up to heavyweight and try to make history because heavyweight is extremely thin. Got to work out the situation with Tom Aspinall and Cedil Gan, but once you get that worked out, and in the meantime, let's let Pineda fight Carlos Olberg because he's going to need a fight while Aspinall comes back to fight Gan. So put Pineda in there with Carlos Olberg. Even if he loses, you can still put him in a heavyweight title fight against Aspinall or Gan, whoever's the champion at the time. He's going for a third belt. It's going to be history, so it's going to sell either way, even if he loses to Olberg. So screw it. Make the Olberg fight, whether he wins or loses, bump him up to heavyweight after that. But Alex Pineda, one of the most dominant champions in the sport right now, even though his reign got broken up a little bit, but still has reigned over this division for the last couple years with an iron fist. One of the most exciting fighters in the sport, one of the most interesting personalities in the sport, and I would love to see him bump up to heavyweight. And with that said, we've got one more episode of Meet the Fighters. It is the heavyweights, potentially Pineda's next division. So we will get to the heavyweights next. Thank you guys for tuning in to the light heavyweights. I will see you guys in the next one. Chama.